Today, we're going to create what I like to call a type ahead feature, where I've got a list of cities and states with their population in it. When I type something in like new, it's going to show me everything that matches the word new. If I type in York or Boston or West, it's going to show me every single city and state that matches whatever I've typed in, along with the corresponding population. Now, this data is going to be coming in from an external source. What I've done is I just went on GitHub here and I found a cities.json file, which will include the city name, the state name, as well as the population that we have here. And I've put that into a URL. So, first thing that we need to do is we need to actually go and fetch this data, which is a huge array. And then once that data is back, whenever someone types into this specific box, we're going to filter that array down to a subset of all of the ones that either the city name or the state name will match. So how are we going to do that? Well, first of all, we need an empty array to put our cities into. So I'm going to say const cities equals an empty array. And then we need to go out and fetch our data. We're going to be using a new API in the browser called fetch. And if you've done an HTML or XML HTTP request in the browser before, you probably have used like jQuery $.getJSON or a library like Axios. However, the browser now has a new one built in, which is called fetch. So that's what we're going to use. We're going to call fetch, and you fetch the endpoint. And what fetch will do, if you're used to maybe running a callback like this function and you have the data and then you can console log the data, it works a little bit differently than that because fetch itself will return what is called a promise. And I'll show you that. If we were to just put this in a variable, const prom equals fetch and console log the prom, open that sucker up in our browser, you'll see that, prom, there we go. You see that it doesn't return the data, it returns what's called a promise, which is sort of like something will eventually come back from this fetch. So the way that we can work with a promise is you call .then against it. So you say .then, and it's going to return to us just like a blob of data. I like to call it a blob. And I'll show you why. You might think like, oh, why wouldn't that just be the list of cities? So from that, let's console.log the blob. Okay, so this is what comes back. Response. Of course, it worked. 200. Okay is true. Good. Headers. If we open up the body, there's just a readable stream. Locked false. T? Like, what's going on here? And what's happening is that the data that comes back from our fetch, it doesn't know what kind of data it is just yet. It could be an image, it could be some HTML, it could be some music that's coming back. We explicitly know that it is JSON. So you might think, okay, that's fine. Why don't we just do json.parse, right? That should work, but it doesn't because the blob has to be converted from the raw data that it is in into JSON. So what you do from this is you call blob. And if you look at this blob and you open the prototype, you'll see that there is a method called JSON right there. So if you call blob.json, that itself is going to return another promise, which we're going to call .then on. This is getting a little bit hairy, so let's do this. Oh yeah, that looks much better. .then, and that is going to give you the raw data, which we can console log this data here. Now when I refresh, we get a massive array of all 1,000 cities and states and population, latitude and longitude from each of the ones. Now, how do I get this data into cities? Well, you might think, oh, well, I'll just do cities equals data, right? No problem there. Assignment to a const variable. So we just tried to wipe out a const variable by reassigning it to be the data. So what you could do is you say let cities, and that's a fine way to go about it. Cities is my array. Or if you like to keep your variables const because you do not want that array changing, you can push the items into cities. So you might think, okay, cities.push, and we'll say data, and we'll look at cities. Okay, this is an array of one thing. But if you open that array, then it's okay, that's not it. It's an array of an array. Now we're nested. So how do I get each and every item to go into cities. Well, you might know that cities.push, if you push something like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then look at cities, you'll notice that every time I have another argument to push, it will put it as its own item in the array. And the way that we can change this array into individual arguments is we spread into it. A spread is part of ES6. I've got a whole bunch of videos in my other ES6 series, but you simply spread into a function or spread into this push method, and that will give us proper cities. There we go. Now that's an array of 1,000 different cities that we have. Good. Now I'm happy with that. The next thing we need to do is when someone then types into this box here, I need to run a function that is going to take this massive array and filter it down into a subset where you can then listen for it. So I'm going to create a function here called find matches, and that's going to take in a word to match, and it's also going to take in the cities array because we want to pass in the data into this function that it's going to filter. And from that, we are going to return the cities array, but we're going to call filter on it, which is going to sort of chisel it down into a subset of that initial array. So each one is going to have a place, which is each individual city and state and population and everything like that. And from that, we need to figure out if the city or state matches what was searched, right? Like if I were to run find matches with boss, it should show me Boston and I don't know, whatever other cities have the word boss in it. So we need a couple of regexes because you might think like, okay, we'll just return place dot city dot match. And normally you could do something like this where you search for the word boss. And if it does match, then it will be true and we will give ourselves a subset. But the problem is that the word to match is not always going to be boss or always going to be new or always going to be York. It's going to be a variable. And the variable is word to match. So just pop in the word to match. No, that doesn't work because it's actually going to look for the word to match. So how do you put a variable into a regular expression? Well, you can't just do it in this syntax here. We need to actually create a regular expression outside of it. So let's go above here and we'll say const regex equals new regexp, and you pass it the word to match, and that's going to be whatever the person passes in, boss, new, York, etc., etc. And then you pass it any of the flags that you want. So G is going to be global, meaning that's going to look through the entire string for that specific one. And I is going to be insensitive, meaning that it's not a terrible person where it's insensitive. It's going to match lowercase as well as uppercase, regardless of what you're searching with. So now we call .match with our regex in here, and that's going to take the place.city. And if we take a look at our cities here, you'll see that as each place is New York and the city is going to be New York. But we also need to match the state, which that's a bad example. Here we go. State is going to be California. So we got to return the place.city.match regex or the place.state.match regex. And that will check if the city or the state has either one. So if this one is true or this one is true, the whole thing is going to be true, and therefore our filter is going to be made much smaller. So if I were to then run this, if we were to say find matches and we were to search for boss, and we need to pass it our cities array here, what it returns to us is a smaller array of two things, Boston and Bossier City. Good. We've got our find matches function done. Then what we need to do is create our display function. So say function display matches, and that is going to be called whenever someone changes the value on here. So I'm just going to console.log this.value, and then we're going to select this input that we're working with here. So what is the selector on here? Input type of text, class of search. That's good for me. So I'm going to go down here in case const search input equals document dot query selector dot search. And then we also want to select this UL here, which is suggestions. Then we'll say search input dot add event listener. We're going to listen for the change event. And when the input changes, we are going to run find matches. Save. We should now see when we run it, type in here and I click outside, then it runs that function. Oh, we got an error. Cannot read property filter of undefined in our, because we're not running find matches directly. Sorry. We are running display matches, not find matches. So if I type in here like boss and click outside, it then will trigger in console log this, which is the input dot value, and that's whatever someone has typed into here. New, click outside. So why do I need to click outside? And that's because the change event only fires when you go off that input, not whenever you type into it and key up. So if you want it to also fire on key up, just duplicate that and we'll listen for the key up event. And we'll just rerun display matches on that as well. Now if I type new, hello, boss, you get the point. Every time we key up, it's going to tell us what the person has typed into that box. Now what we want to do is go back to this display matches function here. And we are going to use this find matches function that we built. So we'll say const match array equals find matches. And we are going to pass it this dot value as well as our cities array. And that should give us the match array. Let's try it out. Whenever I type into it, it should run this, call our function, find ones that match it. So boss. There we go. See, the first time I typed B, that was a lot of cities. Second time I typed O, a little less. And then the third time I type boss, it's going to give me that array of just 2 cities that have matched it. Good. So we've got the data, and that's really what I like to stress when we're doing this stuff. Get your data first, get all your functionality in place, and then we'll worry about hooking it up to event listeners as well as creating the HTML that we need there. So we're going to first loop over it. So say const HTML equals match array dot map, and each one is going to be the place. What did we use up here? Yeah, place. I like to keep it consistent. And from each of those, return backticks. It's going to hold our list item, li. Inside of that, we want a span with a class of name, which is going to contain the place.city and the place.state. And below that, we're going to have a span with a class of population, place.population. Then finally, once we've mapped over this array, we can simply call suggestions dot, and what is suggestions? That's this query selector that we've done down here, dot inner HTML equals HTML, which is this HTML that we have here. One last thing is this map is going to return an array when we really want just one string. So we can call it quick dot join on the end, and that will turn it into from an array with multiple items into one big string. Let's give it a shot. Boss, there we go. Boston, Massachusetts, Bossier City, new, looking good. Couple last things we need to do if we look at the actual answer that we're working here is we want to format these numbers here, as well as we want to highlight the actual words like West in West Virginia and West Sacramento. So how do we do that? Well, let's go back to our map function here. And before we return, what we can then do is create a regex. We'll match the city name, and then we'll use that regex to replace the word that it matches, like West, with just a span with a class of HL and the word that it matches. So we're just going to be like plucking the word West out and replacing it with a span with a class of HL. So we'll say const regex equals new regex. We say this dot value, which is whatever the person searched for. We want to search for that globally, because if it's matched more than once in the city name, it'd be kind of cool to show that. And insensitively, we don't care about capitals. And then we will create a city name variable where we're going to take the place.city and we are going to replace the regex, which is whatever it matches, with just a span with a class of highlight. And we'll pop in this dot value. Oh, I got to use backticks there. There we go. So it's going to find whatever it matched in the regex and replace it with a span with a class of highlight and then the value that the person had searched for. So now when we take that city name, we can replace it place.city with the city name variable, which is going to include the HTML for us. Type in boss, and there we go. It's matching it. If I type in Wes, working so far, but we also have to do it for the state name. So I'll just duplicate this and change it to state name and place.state.replace. And then you take that state name variable and replace it right here. There we go. Looks like it's working. Finally, what we need to do is find a function that is going to put in commas for us. So I've just got a function right here. You can grab this from the answer if you don't feel like typing it, or go to your nearest Stack Overflow and take that answer. And I'm just going to paste it in here. Number with commas, it's just going to replace it and going to give you those nice commas. So we can go to our population and say number with commas, and it will then give us those nice commas instead of everything that we have there. So new, there we go. We're matching new in the state. We're matching new in the city name, as well as we are putting in those nice commas to display the data to the user. That's it for today. If you want a little bit more of a challenge, maybe go to this data and say, what else could I use to sort this data? Maybe you could figure out how does geolocation work, which is coming in a future video, and sort it by what are the cities that are closest to me rather than just the order that they appear in this array explicitly. Thanks a lot, and I'll see you in the next one.